So what I've done is I've put these highlighted notes on your home page so that it can focus you a little bit with your studying. So if you go to Blackboard, you'll see these highlighted notes. Okay, so this part of the chapter 3, I was basically kind of a review. You guys have already been introduced to this when I explained what the different categories of drugs are. So I don't think there's anything new here. You can cross out. I have, as you'll see in a moment, I've crossed out the section on miscellaneous plant stimulants. So these last 3 there, cathinone, ericoline, or yohimbe, aren't anything that I'm going to focus on. I might throw them in as a wrong answer, but they won't be questions on there. So basically going through here, you know, you have your natural, you have your synthetic. By now, I think everybody knows the physical side effects of the stimulant. You could rattle them off. It's nothing new. Mental emotional effects, you already know that. So basically, if we kind of go back here, I did explain to you about abusers usually binging, maybe on methamphetamine, staying up for 10 or 12 days, then they've got to crash, and then after the crash, they will have the anhedonia, anergia, and intense craving for the drug. So the very first specific drug we talked about this semester is cocaine. So you need to know the plant, the official name, erythroxylon coca, and where it grows. And you need to know, highlighted here, history. If it's not highlighted, you don't need to focus on it. Went through chewing, drinking, which is what they did when they extracted the cocaine and were able to dissolve it in fluids. I'm trying to find a place to put this thing. I hate when women's pants don't have front pockets. It's like, Jesus, useless. Okay, so I mentioned a couple of famous people that got into these preparations, elixirs. So when you're going through your history, again, remember that when we talk about main events happening, most of the time it's going to be the 18th century. I don't know how people can miss questions when I give you a choice of dates of different centuries and you don't pick the 18th. So I'd rather have you know the century than the specific date. So injecting it, highest blood levels of cocaine possible. Then people started snorting it, 1920s, a little surprising. Explained to you about that you can't smoke cocaine hydrochloride. That's that crystal. You've got to freebase it. So if I ask you, what does freebasing do? It reduces the melting point and vaporization point of the cocaine so that you can smoke it in a pipe. Cocaine has medical uses, but before we get to that, I just mentioned that if I ask you what the difference is between amphetamines and cocaine, in terms of mechanisms, there's not a lot. In terms of the big difference is cocaine is so fragile. Disappears very quickly. So with amphetamines, you can get a lot longer effect. I explained that cocaine is the only naturally occurring anesthetic and how it's used. Thinking here, let me check. We might be able to cross out some of this since I've already completed the questions. I can narrow it down a little bit. We already basically went over that. I just told you about it. Okay. Polydrug use, when people combine downers to take the edge off when they're going into a crash from amphetamines. Or sometimes they drink. They might do a combination of some alcohol, Valium. You need to know what this molecule is, cocaethylene. It's formed when you have high blood levels of alcohol and cocaine produces a lot of cardiovascular damage. Adulteration, just the idea that nothing you get is going to be pure, so there's various things people add to their drug to fool people. I gave an interesting example of procaine, why you might be able to be successful fooling people with procaine. You have to know this, you do need to know, I'll ask you to pick out the overdose symptoms of someone overdosing on cocaine, be the same for amphetamines. And long-term use, what you have to worry about is your heart and blood vessels. The high blood pressure, pushing the heart, that's the big problem. This was kind of too much general comments here, so there's no specific questions I can ask. I cross that out. Remember, you have these available on your homepage. Now we move on to amphetamines. You know they're stimulants. Big difference, they last longer. Basically, don't worry about these trade names. They're not even around anymore. I just give you several examples of different kinds of amphetamines here. I'm not going to ask you to tell the difference. There's one I'll mention again, Adderall, that's been used to treat attention deficit. All right, with every drug, I give you some history. When was it first synthesized? When was, in terms of amphetamines, kind of interesting. It was the original treatment for asthma. It was inside those little rescue inhalers. World War II, everybody started making amphetamines to give to soldiers. A big, drastic increase. Overprescription, 1970, 6 to 8% of people had amphetamine prescriptions for weight loss. Don't have to worry about those. Routes of administration, usually you're going to get an amphetamine pill. Okay, that's about the only thing I can take here. People do inject it, and they do snort it, although it has very irritating effects. And now, the big thing is smoking amphetamines. This affects physical effects and mental effects. You should be able to lay that out next to the cocaine effects, because they're both working through the dopamine, norepinephrine system. So I don't think there's anything really specific here. And let's see, anything new here? Oh, just know the 4 steps of treatment. That's actually all you really have to know. Detox, initial abstinence, long-term abstinence, and recovery. Just know that there are 4 steps to treatment that most clinics use. That would be about it for that page. I mean, as long as you know what those are. Okay. Yeah. ADHD, my notes here. Okay. As long as you know what ADH means, and that one of the drugs that was very popular for treating it happens to be an amphetamine conjugator. That's why we bring up ADHD here. So methylphenidate Ritalin is a drug. It's been prescribed for ADHD, and now for older people, not children, now people are turning to more Adderall. Now remember, any kind of drug, I will give you both names. For example, methylphenidate and Ritalin. I'll always have Ritalin. I'll have methylphenidate and Ritalin. So I know these chemical names are tongue twisters. They're hard to remember. If you want to just learn the brand names, trade names, that's fine. I will give you both. They'll be next to each other on your questions. So what's the diagnosis? What's going on here? This is a diagnosis. It's a deficit in the development of these executive control parts of the brain, controlling judgment, attention span, ability to inhibit behavior. We have 3 types of diagnosis in the United States. Just know the top 3 symptoms for each. Everybody able to hear me that they can? You're not being distracted by other people? Okay. Top 3 for inattentive. Top 3 for, and I actually made the correct titles here, hyperactivity and impulsivity. So, I think you could, anyone, if I said, you see a child fidgeting, squirming, leaving his seat, running around, talking excessively, those would be symptoms of the predominantly hyperactive type. You don't have to worry about the combined type. More prevalent in boys than girls. How do the stimulants work? They increase the attention span. Well, they're going to increase synaptic levels of dopamine, norepinephrine. That's going to focus attention, increase the attention span, and that seems to calm these kids down. Two drugs here, Ritalin, the congener, D-amphetamine, or any kind of amphetamine salt, can be an Adderall. Works for about 75% of the children. All right. And people were thinking these kids would turn to addiction because they've been exposed to a drug, and actually they're 84% less likely to drop out of school and get into drugs. There's those plant stimulants, you don't have to worry about that. Last of the stimulants, caffeine and nicotine. Now you get the idea here. If you go through these notes, you come to class, you've been paying attention to me, you've done your quizzes, you know where you're at. This is your second exam, so you got to have a better idea of what the questions are like. So where did caffeine drinking come from? Turkey and Arabia. It's the most popular stimulant in the world. I know that's a question. Let's see here. What are the withdrawal symptoms? Don't have to worry about this one. Didn't ask you guys that. And how does it work? Everybody's got to know that. And some examples of doses. If I ask you how much caffeine is in a Vitamin tablet, that's an over-the-counter drug you can get to help you stay awake. It's 200, same as an espresso. So those are all there. Oh, nicotine. Who first brought it back to Europe when he saw Native Americans smoking it? Good old Chris. Again, just going here through the history. There wasn't anything specific there. I did kind of, some reasons why smoking increased so much in the United States. Milder tobacco, great advertising, cigarette rolling machines, the fact that people were making tons of money. It's, the states that were growing it were very happy. And everybody forgot that there's an addictive drug in tobacco. So that explains that kind of exponential rise in the amount of cigarettes sold in the United States. Know that for a cigarette, you get about a milligram per cigarette. You get about a milligram dose. For a chew of chewing tobacco, 4.5. It is a potent drug. You don't need a lot. Tolerance. Even after maybe the first time smoking, within a couple hours, the second time you try it, you're already developing tolerance. I did not ask you guys that. Just know acetylcholine is the main neurotransmitter through which nicotine works. Didn't really ask you guys that. And know about the carcinogens in tobacco smoke, the nitrosamines. Understand carbon monoxide, why it's so deadly, ties up your hemoglobin, and carbon dioxide also stresses your heart and your blood vessels. So it's not just lung cancer that kills people, it's also carbon monoxide effects on the heart. So the statistics are pretty telling. If you look at 85% of the men, 75% of the women with cancer, they're smokers. They have been smokers, or they are smokers. I didn't ask you guys anything about the fetal effects. That's another section on that. For chewing tobacco or smokeless tobacco, you're absorbing it right here, so your lung cancer rates go down. But guess what? You need to know what goes up. Is a young lady here that I fixed her clicker? I don't remember your name. I should. Okay, anyway. It's not working. It wouldn't turn on. I think somebody spilled Coke or, I mean Diet Coke or Coca-Cola, not cocaine, sorry. A soft drink into it. I took out the battery compartment, cleaned it, it works. So spilling things on electronics doesn't help, so I fixed your clicker. All right, so chapter 4 is basically just these, really going into more detail. You knew about the downers when I first introduced them to you as a category. Now I just went into more detail about them. First group was the painkillers. So I would say this is all kind of review here. You should just know the 3 types of downers: the opioids, the painkillers, sedative hypnotics, and alcohol. Those are the 3 types of drugs. Types of classes. Know what the official name is of the opium poppy is. If you think poppy, papaver, you're set. What does it make? It actually makes morphine and codeine. Once we figured out what morphine and codeine looked like and we extracted it, then we started making all kinds. So these things that are listed here, we'll get back to it when we look at the specific, which ones you have to know. These are just the examples here. Again, opium poppy. Ancient, changed the course of human history. First people ate it, then they smoked it. In this period where people started smoking opium, you need to know the Opium Wars, what went on there. It's a war between England and China. When was morphine first refined from that raw opium? It's a big date, pretty early in the 1800s. And what came next, when we got more sophisticated, is heroin. A better pain reliever, and you know why. Let's see. Hypodermic needle is kind of mixed up in there in the middle of the 1800s. I don't think I asked you guys anything about when that occurred. Nothing about patents. All right, one specific date and regulation you need to know is the Pure Food and Drug Act, because it was the first time the government of the United States decided they had to regulate opium, cocaine, even alcohol, because of so much addiction that was occurring in the United States. Because you could get it over the counter, it was being overprescribed, it was a big problem. So just know the first one, still in effect today. All right, you need to know who grows most of the opium that's going to provide heroin. You don't have to worry about the Golden Triangle. They're passé at this point. It's all Afghanistan. Okay, you need to know the 3 reasons doctors prescribe these painkillers. So I explained pain, how we feel pain, how we naturally fight pain, and what these drugs do. Okay, so that's the section on pain. I explained to you that they're used to treat coughs. They suppress these reflexes in the neck, the cough reflex, brainstem, and they stop life-threatening diarrhea. So they prescribed a lot for that in third world countries. I think everybody by now should be able to know the physical side effects of the painkillers. When I told you about remembering this stuff, just imagine somebody who has taken a large dose and has been using heroin for a while. What is their problem going to be? They're going to be constipated. Their pupils will be small. Their eyelids droop. I showed you that picture of ptosis, drooping eyelids. Relaxed, dry, itchy skin. Sometimes they get sick when they take it, but that's not always the issue. But everybody can identify those. And you know that the opposite of these things is the withdrawal. So as people get tolerant, they get higher and higher dose if they're partying with these drugs. And so now you have, feels like a bad case of the flu, know the withdrawal symptoms. Didn't really ask you about the specific time course here. Here I'm just basically talking about heroin, particularly people who use it IV. The main thing would be stress for a newborn, because they're immediately going to go through withdrawal. If the mother's been using heroin, all these psychoactive drugs get across the placental barrier just like the blood-brain. People do OD on these drugs. I just hear this mumbling background here. Okay, I don't need to be here. I could definitely be doing something else right now. So if you guys want to distract other people, just look at me. You only have a couple minutes left, okay? Just hear this subtle background, and it's just been a bad day already, so I don't want to make it worse by winging something at somebody like a pen. Look at me. Listen to me. Sorry, I had too much coffee and I'm too tense. Okay, I don't have a single adenosine receptor that is not blocked at this point. Okay, so, here you go. Here's your symptoms of ODing. If you found somebody unconscious on a bathroom floor at a party, you would know, you would see this, lift their eyelids, you would see their constricted pupils, you're dialing 911 and say it's a painkiller overdose. It saved that person's life. So I mentioned one drug that will immediately reverse a painkiller overdose. It was produced accidentally. They were trying to make a painkiller, and they made a pain block, or they made something that stimulated endorphin receptors. They made something that blocked them. So that's an important drug to know. Only time you can really reverse an overdose. Easily. This is all related to IV drug use. Don't need to know that. And this is pretty sad that 50 to 90% of, in most big cities, if you're an IV drug user, you've been exposed to hepatitis C. No symptoms, it just starts destroying your liver. You're also, half of the IV drug users are carrying the HIV virus that they can spread to their non-drug using sex partners if they have unprotected sex. All right. Didn't really ask you guys about this. Okay. Now I gave you a list of the main examples of all the main opioid painkillers. I think everybody at this point knows that heroin was a brand name for diacetylmorphine. Again, I'm repeating the main source, Afghanistan. However, India is the only country that grows the opium poppy legally. India supplies all the medical morphine from these plantations. Different kinds of heroin, just describing what they look like. So you recognize China white, Persian brown, and black tar are types of heroin that have been smuggled into the United States. Now, the second main painkiller is codeine. It's weaker than morphine, but has uses for coughs and for moderate pain. So if I asked you for a definition of morphine, I might say, which of the following painkillers is the standard for pain relief? Meaning that every drug is compared to this one. It's morphine. Still the standard. Very good drug. Now, all those semi-synthetic and synthetic ones, basically, I've given you a little description of each one. So what drug has been given to help heroin addicts come off of the craving and withdrawal? I'll always give you both. I didn't ask you guys about OxyContin, but I did ask you about know what the most abused painkiller is. I know that's a question. What's the most powerful? Fentanyl. What do they call designer heroin? That's a synthetic version of fentanyl that's out there. Sometimes it looks like China white. It's very dangerous because it's so powerful. Finally, what drug can reverse an overdose? There. You don't have to worry about lamb. Well, we just finished the sedative hypnotics. They should be pretty fresh in your mind. You know that there's two types. Benzodiazepines and barbiturates, this is what they're prescribed for. These are sedative hypnotics. What are their effects? They're kind of like alcohol in a pill. You want to remember that? How do they work? I'll explain it to you here. They bind to your natural GABA receptors and enhance the response of GABA at those receptors. It's like it's jacking up your natural sedative system. You know GABA. Okay, that was kind of explanation. It's not very specific there for a question. It's kind of interesting. Throughout the history of mankind, Homo sapiens, we needed something to help us stay calm and sleep, deal with our problems, and these two drugs did it. The two oldest drugs we've talked about. And people are still using them today. All right. So a little history here. I've crossed out ones you don't have to know about. D is important. That's when I introduced the first barbiturate. They were overprescribed. They were used as sleep aids, insomnia, whatever. People started partying with them and ODing with them. It's a low margin of safety. So I only gave you two barbiturates. And I only gave you, this one's a chemical name, that's a trade name. I didn't even give you both. There's only two you need to know. F is important because I introduced the first time benzodiazepines made their appearance. So I already asked you this as a clicker question, so I think we'll get it right this time. When, in 1960, what was the first one that came to market? They were so successful, 1975, 100 million prescriptions were being written a year. Okay, so these benzodiazepines have a lot of medical uses. If you think about it, treat anxiety, anxiety for patients going in for surgery, insomnia, which means you can't sleep. If you have epilepsy or cerebral palsy, they can help calm down your muscle tension. And they can save an alcoholic who's going through withdrawal. They can prevent them from having seizures. So be able to recognize those. I just listed the three these are the most widely prescribed. Alprazolam, I introduced to you on the first day lecture when I talked about a little table with trade names, chemical names, and street names. I talked about alprazolam. People party with it. It's called bars. That's the street name. Clonazepam is the latest one that's coming out. I've talked to a lot of young people that are getting this. It has a more extended response, so it doesn't wear off as fast. I think everybody knows Valium. Tried and true. Nothing wrong with these drugs except people start partying with them and they were overprescribed. So you get tolerant, especially problem is increase your dose, and if you look at the elderly, they kind of have reverse tolerance. They can't get rid of it. Of course, like tissue dependence, some people need these drugs to function. Oh, and I told you how Rohypnol got the name date rape. Explain that to you. So if these drugs allow you to sleep, make you feel calm, and things like that, what would be the withdrawal symptoms? Think of all the opposite things of being calm, being able to sleep. You're going to be insomnia, trembling. People have rebound anxiety. Now the thing about these drugs is they're very safe, but some people have combined them with alcohol and accidentally overdosed. When you combine multiple types of downers, this is a problem where you can get an unexpected, heavy sedated response. All right, there are a couple sedative hypnotics that are not benzos or barbiturates. You guys, if you know methylpolone, it's an old one. It was around when I was in school, in college. Quaaludes was one trade name. Well, apparently it's raised its ugly head again. There's now a street version of it available. It was drawn from the market because so many people were ODing, drunk driving accidents, college kids running around with Quaaludes and alcohol. GHB is an interesting story, how it went from a sleep inducer in the 60s to a bodybuilder amino acid for growth hormone to a club party drug today. So it's an amino acid that has calming effects. It's had an interesting history. I don't think anybody, probably nobody in the United States has not seen advertisements for these drugs. Sonata, Imovane, Ambien, the other one's Lunesta. This is how desperate people are to sleep. They keep trying to come up with safer and better sleeping aids. So these are the top ones now. Their chemical names all begin with Z. That's why they're called the Z hypnotics. And finally, a last warning to you guys. A lot of young people overdose because they take more than one downer. It's called synergism. People have a few drinks. They take a Xanax. Later on, they see somebody that gives them a Vicodin. They take that. They drink some more. And finally, as they're on their way home, they decide that they're going to pop a Valium or something. That's too many downers. You're going to go into an overdose. Don't mix them. All right, so what's going on for Monday is the same thing that happened with your first exam. You put your Banner number on your PAR score. Bring that with you in your pencil. Remember to sleep before you come in. I'm going to ask a clicker question here, if you can hang with me. Just giving you a little advice. I'm not going to open up the Chapter 5 online quizzes until after your exam, so you can focus on this. So the last two quiz types we have are Chapter 5, alcohol, Chapter 6, so, all-arounders. And I'm going to put an announcement so everybody knows ahead of time, and then I will send a mass email when it happens. I will be opening up all of the quizzes for 1 week for all you people who, for one reason or another, missed a deadline. So I have not given you a specific date yet. It's probably going to be around April 20th. About the third week of April. They will all open up. Before I do that, each of you will receive an email from me. I will announce it in class. I will put it on Blackboard announcement. And if you miss it that time, I can't help you. Okay, if you can't somehow take this opportunity, if you've missed any of the quicker quizzes, to go ahead and do it, that won't help. Okay. Okay, I'm going to get set here for this question. This will be our last question for March. So I'll be able to roll these points into my grades under clicker 2, which will be all the March points. I can't add anything to those tables I've showed you, but okay. Okay, just checking here. I'll open it up in just a second. Find it here. This may actually be a repeat for you guys, but that's all right. It'll help you focus for your final. So it's now open. So I'm asking you, why do people die? What really kills a heroin overdose victim? What really is the end that kind of ends it all? When people die, it can be a complicated process. People just say they OD'd. Well, I wanted to know what they meant by that. So I want you to know that multiple things can be going on. This is what's going to get to them and end their life. The only other drug we have that you'll have to worry too much about ODing on is alcohol. It's for tolerant people, it's almost impossible to overdose, but most people who die from alcohol OD are young and have never drank before. And then Chapter 6, the hallucinogens, marijuana, none of those you can OD on, so that's not the issue there. The issue there is fear and misunderstanding, and these are very potent drugs that can freak people out. Okay, we're sitting at 2:18. I'm going to shut it down to 2 minutes, and I'll show you the answer. So we've got a weekend to study. The student, she never came to get her clicker? Not here? Where are you at? All right. Okay. 2:30, we're sitting there. The thing about the clickers is you either get a green light, I got your answer, or a red light, I didn't, or it doesn't turn on. There's only 3 things that can happen. So, and if it turns off when you try and vote, it means low batteries. %, that's pretty good. It's asphyxiation. In your notes, look that up. What kills them? Severe respiratory depression. So if you pick B, you're really off because that's a stimulant effect. So you need to do a lot of studying. I mean, why would heroin have a stimulant effect? Well, I might try to, but I have got like a 5-hour meeting at some point. So what's going on?
I was just talking about the test. How to stop by old test.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, I'm going to be working there. I won't be finished up